You have a question up here?
Yeah, I wanted to, excuse me, from what I've read about what you've written, you've painted the NGOs as sort of a threat to the World Bank's future. I wanted to know what sort of value you do see in their relationship with the World Bank, and as a corollary to that, what it is that you use to measure a good NGO versus a bad NGO, because you differentiated between the two.
Right. Well, you know, sometimes I used to kid that, you know, I'm surprised this took a while for this question to come up. Normally people sort of, you know, jump on my head in the first 5 minutes and say, you hate NGOs, don't you? And if you know, Google the Mallaby effect, you will find people saying that the effect of Mallaby is very, very bad indeed for the world. I did make a critical argument about NGOs in my book, and I made it for the reason that I was explaining earlier over here, that essentially I think legitimate environmental criticisms of the World Bank circa 1980-1985 spilled over into illegitimate, exaggerated criticisms of the projects, you know, circa 1995. And that when the arguments were pushed too far, the consequence was, you know, the holding up of loans that actually would have reduced poverty. And I care about that reduction in poverty, and therefore, although I think the NGOs often have good motivation and sort of, you know, the right intentions, the effect has been sometimes negative. And you know, in my book, I tell a story about you know, the interruption of a potential dam in Uganda. Uganda being a country which really did have a bottleneck in how much it could grow, how much it could create jobs, how much it could reduce poverty because of the lack of electricity. You couldn't put a factory up because there was no power to power it with. So, you know, there was a real anti-poverty reason for building this dam, and it was interrupted by NGOs who campaigned against it. And some of the claims that the NGOs made, not all of them, but some of them, were just false. When I was in Uganda, I went to interview the people around the dam to check out the assertion that they were all furious about being relocated. And I went around with a woman from the university in Kampala who could translate for me, who was a sociologist. And we interviewed families all around this dam, and they all said they were happy with the compensation, the financial compensation they'd been offered to move from where they were when the dam was built, because the money was going to be enough to buy better land somewhere else in Uganda, and they could grow more. And the only people we found who were upset with the thing were people who were not going to be affected by the project. They were just outside the perimeter, and they were annoyed because they wished they had been affected by the project because the compensation was so generous. And yet this particular NGO, which is called the International Rivers Network in Berkeley, California, you know, whose idea of a power crisis is that the elevators don't work for 2 days in the summer in Northern California. You know, I was telling Uganda that they shouldn't build a source of electricity. I mean, it's outrageous. And they were saying on their website that the local people around the dam hated the dam, opposed the dam. I went to see, and it was, you know, was factually wrong. So I am critical about these groups when they do that kind of thing. I'm basically in favor of NGOs as a whole. I'm certainly in favor of having lots of them in developing countries where there's a lack of pluralism, a lack of voices who oppose the government, who give a diversity of views. I'm in favor of groups in the rich world that do projects in poor countries, you know, actually deliver services. And I'm in favor of campaigning NGOs that make political arguments in rich countries if the arguments are right? But if they kind of make stuff up, that's where I draw the line. And it's sort of, you know, I would kid people, you know, when I was being attacked, you know, for some of these arguments. And they would say, you know, you've written this book attacking NGOs, and now you're just against NGOs. And I would say, well, look, I work for the Washington Post. People write to us, you know, on a regular basis saying, you know, on page A17, you made a factual error in your story about such and such. And our response is not to say you're against the press, or you're against the First Amendment, or you want a police state. Our response is to print the correction, right? Now, I've found you out making some mistakes. You should just print the correction, not attack me for being anti-NGO.